This week on your Old School RuneScape update, Behind the Scenes of Sailing, Volume 1 brings a new look into the work that has been ongoing with Old School's newest skill. We discuss navigation, the pitfalls of taking a huge risk with sailing, and what needs to happen to make sailing successful. This is the Old School RuneScape update, episode 42, recorded Saturday, August 24th, 2024, Sailing Around the Future. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Old School RuneScape update. Sirion and myself are here as we are each and every week. Good to be with you, and we were wondering what we were going to discuss this week until Friday, weren't we?
Yeah. The teams at Jagex, I think this is the case for both games. They have a habit of, leaving us wanting until the very end of the week.
Yeah, and see, that's not an issue for this show because we record on Sunday and the other show records on Thursday. But we do have the sailing progress update here, so we will be going through all of that in good detail. But you did mention the RS3 show, and that show hit 1,000 this week. So if you want to see what we did for that, or you just want to see what a episode 1000 podcast looks like from our production, go ahead and listen to that. youtube.com/RSVNB. I don't normally plug the RS3 show on this one. I plug the Old School show a lot on the RS3 show, but I felt like I had to for 1,000 this week.
Yeah, it's it's like, if you think about it, right? And just to put this in perspective, it's a weekly show. That's 50 weeks or so a year. That means the show has been around for 20 years at this point.
Yeah, our actual 20th anniversary is next June, and that's what happens over all those years. Is those extra 2 weeks a year start adding up? Because we've only missed a few shows when I was sick a few times, because we try and get a show in each and every week of the year. But I remember back in the day when that show used to be set in the Old School era, and we had this little thing called an April Fool's Day prank.
Uh-huh.
That involved sailing.
Yes.
And lo and behold, the next skill coming to Old School RuneScape is sailing, and we got a big behind-the-scenes post this week. They're calling it Behind the Scenes of Sailing Volume 1. Do
I remember correctly that the original reason that sailing became so known is that, like, I think it was divination, like the divination quest or something like that. Like, there was like this it was like a screenshot of a monitor of, like, and back in the day with the YouTube quality, it wasn't great, and like people thought the icon looked like a sailboat. I think it ended up being like signposts or something like that, but people thought it looked like a sailboat, and I think that's how the rumor mill started.
Yeah, and, I think that was then later memed into being, because I never saw it, but I think that was later memed on by Jagex into actually putting that on the skill list and saying, sailing. And that's I think, what sold it for the people. And the interesting bit about all this is that when you look at this and you sum all this up to where we're at today, you get to a point here where you say, well, sailing could be interesting, but at the same time, what are we gonna stand to gain from it at the end?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the thing that has bothered me the most about the skill. It's that it won because it was a meme, but at the same time, we're asking the impossible to happen, I think, in terms of just how it's going to carry itself out. But I don't know. How are you feeling about it at this point before we dive into the various posts here?
Yeah, I mean, sailing has never really sparked my fancy.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to really get past, right? I think the concept of sort of exploration and trying to capture that in a skill, it it has merit, right? Like I think you could do something interesting there, just like how RS3 managed to capture the concept of lore into a skill.
with
I don't
archaeology.
see why you couldn't with archaeology. I don't see why you couldn't capture the concept of exploration into a skill.
Yeah, and see that's the thing that sold me about it when I was, just looking at the various loops they were selling in the last post, because it was like, oh, this is actually, when you boil this all down, this is an exploration skill.
Yeah.
And if you were doing this on land and you were maybe using it to uncover some riches or uncover some lore, that would be actually really interesting. And it was that lens of it that sold me on it and made me go just a little bit further to say, well, let's just see what they got down the road with this. So
and that's, I think, the one and most important thing, especially with a community-driven process like this. Like, you're not gonna like every update, right? Not every update is going to be for you. We know this. We are both not massive fans of Slayer, and like our Slayer levels are far off from being able to play next week's content. That doesn't mean that we necessarily think it is bad for the game to have that piece of content release, right? So it in a sense, if sailing is indeed the thing that most of the community wants, then I'm willing to sit it out. The problem that I'm starting to feel more and more and more is that at this point I would have hoped that they were further along with the process, and we're already seeing a pretty significant reduction in the frequency of content updates, both because of Varlamore and because of sailing. It's
okay,
sort of
I just want to stop you right there, because normally we talk about that, and that's a given when we run these kind of analyses about missing content on the other show. How do you get to that point that it's as a result of sailing and Varlamore that we're seeing less content? How do you get to that point?
Because they have outright said so in previous posts.
Have they?
And updates. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I missed that.
They have said that they are not doing like big holiday events off the back of that before, for example.
Right. So that's why the last one was rerun.
Exactly. So that's sort of the idea behind it. So and we just know that most of the team is caught up in it, and I just look at all of the engine changes that they are needing to make, and we'll get back into more of the detail about that in a moment. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I don't think a new skill should require a completely new engine like capability.
The last time they did this was dungeoneering. No, dungeoneering was big, and construction. Because when you think about it, what construction added to the game was the ability to instance things.
Yeah.
And then you use that same instancing for farming, for example, except on the surface world rather than in a POH. So
I mean, I think that's fair, right? But we now need to consider. I don't actually have the numbers on it. My expectation is that the old school team is actually slightly smaller at this point, but that might be wrong. So don't quote me on that. Please don't lynch me on the internet. But like at the same time, is this the best bang for your buck? Like I look at the other ideas, and in particular, shamanism, right?
Yeah.
I know it was a close second, and I know it's a little bit more mundane if you compare it to the existing skills. But to me, that makes it feel way more old school. First of all, it feels way more like in line with the rest of the game. But I get the sense that they wouldn't have to rewrite the entire engine for that, which is what they're doing right now for sailing. So even if we all, as an entire community, agree that we get more value out of sailing than out of shamanism, I think the difference is so small that it doesn't justify all of the extra development effort that's being put into these engine changes right now.
Right,
And that's what has
exactly.
me worried. That's what has me worried at this point. Right?
Yes.
Like, I'm willing to sit out an update if it's not for me. But
And
the level of investment is getting so huge that I'm like, am I sitting here for 2 years where half the team is dedicated to this piece of content that I actually have no interest in? That's a pretty hard sell for me.
exactly. And the question, throughout all this is that keep in mind that a number of actual players who have got their hands on this of what we have so far is very small, to the point where they're still doing very limited alpha tests in studio and remotely on that, and they're looking to expand that out in next year with a technical alpha for the rest of us. So when you add all this up, we're already at 2025 here. So I think that this puts the skill at 2026 at the earliest, perhaps.
Oh, at the earliest, yes.
Which means we're on this same path for that long in terms of, figuring out where all the big update pieces are going to land, right? So, again, it's a question. I think there's going to come a time where they have to ask inside, when do we pull the plug on this?
Yeah, and I think the big problem I'm seeing right now is that we get this sunken cost fallacy going on because now they have like a bunch of the engine changes, but they're still not at the point where they can prototype things in the engine.
Right.
Like they decided,
and the things they need to do are so bespoke. What are you going to use them for if sailing gets canned?
Yeah.
But yeah, continue about the prototype. And this was the most interesting thing, is that they said they were particularly playing around with pathing algorithms. One of them they tried as an industry standard, and when they put it into the game, it crashed the server when they scaled it up to 2,000 players. So where do they go after this to start prototyping things for sailing with where they're at? They moved to an entirely different game engine, which, is a smart choice, honestly. I don't know if you want to go into some of the technical details about what that means, moving from their engine to Unity.
I mean, Unity, in case you don't know, it's one of the most famous game engines right now. What a game engine tends to do for you is it solves a lot of the problems that everybody has. Like, it solves rendering to screens. It solves having an update loop. It solves having a physics engine.
Collision detection.
Usually there's a bunch of tools around, like 3D tile sets, 3D grids, or 2D grids. All of that sort of comes into a package, which means you have to do way less yourself. Now, RuneScape runs on a custom in-house built engine.
RuneTech.
RuneTech, exactly. So if they needed a new capability, they needed to first build it into the engine. So their idea was, let's just go into an engine that has all of this, right? So we don't have to work around. Like, RuneScape Tech is tick-based and grid-based right now. And they wanted to do, like, to test things outside of that. And by just, like, they could have written a completely new engine from scratch, but that would have taken them very long time.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Game engines are complicated. So I think this was the right decision, especially because there's certain parts of the RuneScape engine that they don't need. Like, they don't need network syncing. They don't need any networking because it's just a prototype.
Yeah.
So.
And Unity is known for being able to get something running very quickly in terms of, if you are familiar with the engine and you have your assets and you know what you want to do, you can go very quickly with it to get that first prototype.
Yeah. It's famous for being used in game jams and prototypes. A little bit less these days by actual indie developers, because Unity has not proven themselves to be a very reliable partner when it comes to revenue share.
Yeah, with the rights and all that.
We'll not go into that right now, but especially for things like game jams, where like commercial elements are not important and prototypes, it's still pretty solid.
Yeah, like I consider myself a pretty okay programmer, and one afternoon I decided that I wanted to, just mess around with Unity for a bit, and by the end of that afternoon, I had a very simple, brick breaker kind of game going in it. So that's how quick you can move in
Hmm.
Unity if you have a general idea of what you want to do with it. So that's why they chose that for the prototyping. And I think the really interesting thing about that is that this proves things to them internally, but once they know how that feels, they then need to bring that back to RuneTech to retrofit into the existing game engine and make it work for sailing when in their own internal tests. And then that doesn't even, get us to the point, well, what if your, handful of players you presently have in studio and remote for alpha testing don't like what you did?
Hmm.
So it's a little bit concerning from that perspective, and keeping in mind the big thing that is the first big bullet point on this list here is navigation in terms of how the boat moves.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think you got to get that right. If not, the sailing's going to feel pretty bad once it gets going.
I mean, at this point, I think it's important to understand what people were actually sold by, right? Like,
What were they sold by?
Okay, no, listen, right? Listen out, like, hear me out. I think that the problem we're having right now is sort of self-created by Jagex, right? So
Yes.
the whole idea is that there's this sailing skill and this concept, but like a lot of that doesn't make it very suitable um, for um, for being in the game, right? Like if you think about a lot of the boat stuff is not actually present on the world map. And there's a lot of scale issues on the world map because like everything is
Yeah.
way too close to each other.
Yeah.
The seas were not made to be navigable. All of that, right? It's all a problem. And you could have worked around that by making sailing not take place on the current oceans, by basically separating it out, or even by
Send it to the Eastern lands.
even saying you're not actually navigating your own boat. Maybe you take sailing into the abstract and it's really just an instance ship. Like a POH. It's a POS, I guess, player owned ship
A piece of
at
shit.
that point. Oh, that's probably what. But like that, that didn't mesh with the players because they were like, oh, it needs to be present in the game
Yeah.
world. And Jags is
Yeah.
like, yeah, we can do that. And we need to be able to sail our own ship. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. And
But here's
at
the
this point,
yeah.
you have overpromised, right? Like you've created a completely separate game within a game. And yeah, of course, people are going to be convinced by that.
Right.
Because they're like, hey, that
And
sounds great.
and remember, I forget what post it was. It was either the last one or the one before it. It said the bulk of the XP you get is going to be from actually navigating your ship.
Yeah, I think that's where they went wrong. I think they should have started this project, gone into the whole thing of navigation, realized this requires us to completely overhaul the engine. We can't do this. And at that point, made a different decision on how the game looks. You can make a sailing skill that doesn't require engine changes. I think you can
Hey,
make a good sailing skill that doesn't require
I might make
like
people
engine changes.
I might make people turn the show off at this point. But RS3 has this. It's called player on ports.
No,
No, you don't think
no.
that's sailing?
No, I don't think that's sailing. I think you can be on the boat yourself. It's just an instant ship that you put upgrades on, and that you're on during the sailing, and you're just managing the ship. I think that's fine.
So
there can be a game loop on the ship.
Okay, so basically then make it like a management simulator kind of
Make
skill
it fishing
on a
trawler,
boat.
but good. It's fishing trawler, but good.
Okay. And then depending on what kind of voyage you would set out on, you might get different things. Like a
Yes.
fishing voyage would be like what you said, fishing trawler plus plus.
Mm-hmm.
Or a lore expedition might be that exploration loop we were talking about.
Yes. And like, maybe that's not what people wanted, right? But if you early in the process realize that it's too costly to make engine changes, and I think it is too costly, because look at how long it's taking them,
Yeah.
right?
Like, they're not even
So we
clear.
have that. I would go back to the community and be like, look, we looked into this. We can't deliver this. We can deliver this version of sailing. And then you put that up against the second choice, which is shamanism, and see which people prefer.
Because, yes, I agree with that. Because if you look at the movement section of the post here in terms of the Unity prototype, in terms of all the different movement styles, this is what is being fixated on right now. It's movement.
And
Like,
yeah,
let me just
I don't
describe
think
movement types 1 and 2, and then we'll
Oh,
we'll
okay.
go, because this is the part that just made me, not want this entirely. And I don't want to say lose faith in Jagex, but just almost tune out. So movement types 1 and 2, you click the ocean to set your direction, not your destination. You click the boat icon in the side panel to set your sail speed. With movement type 2, you click behind the boat to stop moving, and it snaps to quarter tiles, and you'll have 16 directions to choose from. When setting a direction, the boat will move perpetually until it collides with something or you press stop.
Yeah. Look, I think like setting the direction by clicking on the map is not an unnatural thing. It's what you do when you kill the clones at the eclipse moon, right?
Yeah.
It's not unnatural. I can sort of see why it is. I like the idea of putting skill expression in navigation. It's like I don't disagree with anything that they're doing. Right? They made the right choice of using a different engine. They made the right, like they're trying the right things with the movement, right? All of this is proving that yes, I have faith in the Jagex developers to make sailing the very best version of sailing that can be. Absolutely. Let there be no doubt of that. I am just at this point wondering whether this was the best return on investment.
Yeah.
And I am.
Do we know how many people
Ever so
are
tiny,
assigned to the project?
Sorry?
Do we know how many people are assigned to the project? I don't think they ever said.
I think they say in the post how many people were at least assigned originally. I don't know what the current status.
Okay.
But I think it is Jagex's jobs to protect the community against projects that are just unnecessary time sinks, right? Like, this is like the endless complaining on RS3 that the tick system needs to go away.
Which we know won't happen.
Which won't happen because that's rewriting the entire game.
Yeah.
So, like, we are rewriting the entire movement engine apparently to include a new skill.
To
now,
support boats.
Sure. Once this is there, maybe it can be used for other things. Maybe now we can have massive elephants that we can ride around in the desert on their back, right? Like something silly like that. That will all be enabled. Is that really what the game needs, though?
Mounts.
Mounts.
The answer is no to that question. And see, that's the thing. I think over time we're going to start to feel this push as to, where is the content, what is coming in the meantime. And, we'll have an answer to that in about 2 weeks' time with the summer summit to know, what the short term.
Sure, and there's still Valamore, and those are big projects too, and those we will see much sooner. I think, I just can't shed the whole idea that the other skills, taming and shamanism, could have been delivered much quicker. And like I said, even if they might not have been as much value as sailing adds, it's a first skill in old school to ever come out. Why are we trying to make the most difficult and most complex skill to begin with?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at other things that they could have done in that regard, and you start to say, well, did the team want to do? And that'd be actually an interesting thing to hear in the back end, because on the RS3 side, when archaeology came out, player sentiment at the time said do necromancy, but the team wanted
And we know how that went.
archaeology, and they went
out.
that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I've been saying that from the start, right? Like I get the sense that the team was most excited about shamanism because you don't come up with something that is outside of sort of the mold and the ideas that players want if you're not super excited about it. And it's always those outside ideas that I feel work the best. That's what experience has shown us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't want to come across as like a massive like sailing hater or naysayer. It's just we need to be a little bit pragmatic here in terms of capacity, and I think old school needs to prove that it can add new skills. That is super important.
Yeah.
And
because I think if you can't do that, then the future for old school, you throw a question into that, because they've proven they can do everything else, but can they add a new skill?
Yeah, and I think skilling is so important to the game as well, right? Like people really enjoy doing their skills. So like if this doesn't become a success, then I fear for the future of skills, because warding, of course.
Yep, we know what happened there.
We all know what happened with warding.
You and I were very excited about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really understand why they decided to go with such a risky project that won by the smallest of margins. It seems like an incredibly risky decision, and I will stick with my previous statement. I truly and honestly believe that the people who are working on this are competent. This is not a question on that at all. It is a question on whether their time is well spent.
And that's the point that I'm at for this too. I'll echo that. And coming into this, I was pretty much in a position where I'm like, is this going to work? At this point, I think maybe we should pull this. If I was in charge, I'd say pull this and let's ask the player base if this should be continued at this point in time. Just based on I
honestly I haven't checked Reddit what the response to this has been.
It's been civil. I did actually have a look at it. One of the comments I actually saw said that take all the time you guys need. That was one of them. So there has been some civil discourse on this. It hasn't been an absolute hate fest.
No, and look, and that is the right thing, right? But at some point, like, yes, take all the time you need. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, no.
Right. I mean, hey, we got a nice GIF here of open water PvP, somebody casting ice barrage on somebody else passing by in a boat.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. And look, to be honest, those engine things are already like slowly making their way into the engine. So for all we know, they figure out movement, they put it in the engine, and that's the engine phase done. And now they can focus on a cycle of building like good content.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to come across as a naysayer, but
no, that's allowed, and I think at this point you have to question those kind of things about when to cut the losses, right? So
yeah.
Because I think if there's one thing we've proven in these 42 odd episodes so far, is that we're willing to give the Jagex the chance on these sorts of things. And yes, mid-level perspective and all that, but at the end of the day, I've been around on this game since 2004, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this happening before. At least not publicly.
Yeah. No, look, we'll see. I do think it like I mean without I'm trying to figure out if I'm becoming repetitive, but I don't think like I think I can summarize things reasonably well in saying that, um there's like this whole movement aspect, the moment they decided that it became part of the skill, they kind of signed up for all of the engine work and all of the experimentation because they're right. The navigation has to feel right. If it's the core game loop, you cannot mess this up. You cannot make sailing jank.
Yeah, exactly.
So what they're doing is the right thing. If there was a mistake made, and it's my like suspicion it might have been, but I'm ready to be proven wrong. It was made earlier by deciding to make movement part of the skill in the first place.
Yeah.
And that in turn followed from maybe somewhat unrealistic expectations of the community about how sailing worked.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think that is exactly what this is in terms of, the question of sailing. Is it about movement, or like you said, is it some other kind of mini game along the way? And
anyway, I will shut up now before.
No, that's fine. And I think what you get to at the end of this all is that there's a point at which you might just have to say no, but at the same time you ask the question, what even said that movement had to be involved in this? And that's maybe the biggest thing out of this that we came away from, is that if there was no movement, we might be considering something else entirely. But in any case, they actually have a survey form here. Have you filled out the survey form about sailing in terms of, whether or not you could become one of their playtesters for it?
No, not yet. I need to figure out if I can, because it's during working hours and I
Right.
do have a full-time
Okay,
job.
fair enough. Yeah, I do see that limitation there. But I would encourage everybody else who has a genuine interest in this to fill that out honestly and tell them exactly how you feel about that in terms of if you are going to be able to be a playtester with that. But nonetheless, what have we been up to in RS here? And I'll just go first because I know I have the shortest one because it's just been sitting at Nightmare Zone, closing in on 75 strength presently. Yeah, a little bit of AFK here and there on that, and I think that's okay at this point. Looking forward to getting some upgraded weapons and moving on to different combat styles in a little bit there. I want to bring everything up to 75, I think. Just need to do ranged after hitting strength on that. But, the biggest thing of the week.
Oh, no, yes. I'm gonna plug my ears quickly. So I'm a little bit upset about this.
Yeah, I have a reputation of apparently having very good luck in the game of RuneScape. And this past Monday, when I was doing a simple herb run, I was doing toad flax. I'm level 80 farming. I got the farming pet, which according to my numbers is about a 191,764 chance of getting that at that level from that plant.
Yeah.
Which apparently is the rarest pet in the game, and some people have gone way past 200 mil not getting it.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
I mean, it's nice to have. I'd maybe prefer the RNG went on something, that I can sell for a pretty penny on the exchange. But farming is my favorite skill, so I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congrats, I guess. That's your RNG taken care of for the rest of the year, right?
They say that. But
Nah.
Um, I did I did one of the boss logs on RS3 under rate. I also did the RS3 raids boss log at 100 KC, which normally takes about 5 times that amount. So I do have a bit of a reputation for getting spooned.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't expecting it and I wasn't asking for it, so I guess that's why it gave it to me.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
exactly. That's how it's right.
Yeah, exactly.
It was really funny though. Earlier you weren't online, but we were talking in our clan chat,
which is Clan Quest, by the way. If anybody wants to come sit with us in game, we're in Clan Quest. That's the clan chat. You can also
nice plug.
You can also join that if you like quests.
Yes, or not. Anyway, we were talking about pets, and someone was complaining that, hey, my pets command is not working, and people were saying, yeah, that's because you don't have any pets. Like 10 minutes later, they got the mining pet. So you heard it here first. Complaining works.
But I wasn't complaining.
Or you're Shane, right? Either you complain or you're Shane. That's sort of the lesson here, I think.
I think your reaction when I got the pet was the most wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I forget what exactly you said.
I think the entire clan chat lit up with grats, and I was like, for freak's sake. just exasperation. That's, I think, my emotional response to you getting the pet.
Yeah. Okay. What have you been doing?
Not Nightmare Zone. It was just like, in terms of like how the week sort of was structured for me with what I was doing, it just wasn't a good week for Nightmare Zone. So I've been around doing a bunch of things. I did a few easy quests on my Iron Man as well. I went. What did I do? I'm trying to remember, but like I feel it was just a combination of all kinds of things. I did start going after some of the Heart Diaries though, and they're getting harder.
As you might expect.
We finished Spirits of the Elid as one of the quests this week, so that was the last thing I needed to finish the hard desert tasks. But that requires a Calphite Queen kill, obviously. So that was interesting. It took me a few tries, because she hits like a truck when she does hit. Like easily hits like up to 30 hit points. So I could get through the first phase fairly reliably, but then I just didn't have any food left for the second phase.
And do Purrs work there? Remind me fully.
They work against one of the attack style,
Okay.
But she attacks with all three, so that's a problem. Yeah, I after like 3 or 4 times of teleporting out, I came back and I realized she was still in her flying form. I was like, I'm not gonna complain. I'm taking this kill and I'm running with it. So got that one done. I got Kramja Heart done, which included killing you in the fight pits. That was a pleasure. And I'm currently trying to chip away at the Western Provinces hard one.
No, and that involves Zulrah, doesn't it?
That does involve Zulrah. So I did a bunch of searching around on the internet. So Zulrah has 4 different rotations.
Yep.
And there's like a plugin, and you can learn it based on that. But there's switchers, there's prayer switchers, there's like a million things to worry about.
Did you set the good tiles down? Like, did you set tile markers?
Yeah.
Okay,
I have the tile set. But I found a guide, and it will be linked in the show notes. It was a guide by I had the tab open earlier to have their name. By Shawnee Mate OSRS. Which is a mage only one, which I like. That saves me the switching, and basically it's a little bit slower. But during the Tanzanite phase of Zora, where it's not weak against mage, you just basically sit behind a pillar, use it as a moment to heal up, and all of that.
Okay.
And then hopefully you can still get it fairly quickly, but it saves you all the switches. So that's the guide I've been following. And one of the things you do as part of that is basically you only do one rotation. So you check like what rotation is it, and if it's not the rotation, you just use quick hopping to
I
cancel
see.
out of the fight. And then you
Okay.
just cycle until you get the one rotation you like. And I kind of like this approach because instead of having to rely on the plugin, which is like yet another thing to manage, I can really start memorizing like the sequence of events. It's not been going great.
Yeah, I'd have to shake the rust off and get appropriate levels and gear for it. But Zolra was definitely something I did get into when Leagues was happening, and it was actually quite surprising to me that I was able to pull that off, being an old school boss and all that. Because I didn't think that was going to be the case.
Well, you did get massive damage boosts from your relics, right? So I did it once I had like the extra Guardian relic. So I basically had something doing damage continuously. And you can actually use thralls there, which I don't know if I don't think I have tried.
I don't think we even talked about them on the show. I know I read into them after we did Client. Why do I keep calling it Client of Corinth?
That's not the right quest, no.
No, it's a Kingdom Divided.
Yes.
Anyways, I read into them. They seem mostly, chip damage, but it makes sense that they're good and very useful in some places.
Yeah. So anyway, I keep getting caught out, like this one place where you sort of have to run from one end of the horseshoe to another, while switching your prayers to like from range to mage, and that catches me out every single time. So I haven't really gotten much further than that. But
one thing I can recommend for the prayer switches is that I would bind a button on your mouse to whatever F key is for prayer and whichever one is for inventory. I found that greatly helped me with prayer switching and food management in OS. That way then I can just keep the mouse centric over that part of the UI, and that's just a mouse click with a button and then press the
we'll see. The good thing is like I have like a piece of paper here in front of me that has like all the faces, and like the first attempt, like I was just looking at that continuously, and like that becomes too much.
Right.
But my hope is that through repetition I can memorize the pattern, and then it just becomes a matter of execution, and that will definitely be much quicker. I should have the levels to get at least one kill in, I think. It just comes down to getting it right. So I'm doing a mage only one, which should be easier now due to the elemental weakness. So I'm using fire spells. I bought a Tome of Fire for the extra damage.
Remember when Flames of Zamorak was a fire spell?
Oh my! I should have done the kill then. I'm so mad that I didn't get the kill then. I also got myself a Serpentine Helm, which chips a little bit away from my magic accuracy. But my thinking is anti-venom, another thing not to worry about. Like I'm basically minimizing the number of things I have to worry about.
Oh, it completely protects you from venom.
Yeah,
that's big. Okay.
Yeah. So you just wear that, and so really all it is, because I don't have any switches either. It's moving to the right towel and switching to the right prayer. That's really the only thing I need to do, and that's already difficult enough. So.
I want to do that now that you highlighted that, because I feel like, interestingly enough, in game I'm better at prayer switching than you are, but you're better at the movement stuff than I am.
Yeah. Oh yeah, prayer switching for me is a disaster. This is also why I just don't like it either. This is like one of the reasons I don't really like doing Scarius, like all of the prayer switching, meh. So yeah, I did go back to the other bosses that require a bunch more movement, which is the Moons of Peril. I got a bunch of the combat achievements there, including the endurance one for doing 30 moon kills, so that's 10 full cycles
Have you
in a
done
row.
Gauntlet yet?
I have not done Gauntlet yet, no.
Okay.
But yeah, the moons are interesting. I dislike the orb mechanic where you have to stay behind the orb. I just get caught out by that almost every single time, which means I still don't have the achievement for not taking any special attack damage during an entire run, mostly because of the orb. I'll get it one day, I'm sure, but it's yeah, and I love how the blue moon with the Makaras that I'm using right now, it's butter. Like I just go to it like butter.
Yeah, and
So
that's what we were told when the moons came out, is that, you know, if you had that entry high level gear, it would be a decent combat
it's
experience.
doable. I still especially the Eclipse Moon, like because once she builds up like the defense over time, you get the damage gets reduced quite significantly. So that one can be a little bit of a drag for me. And the blood one is very RNG based. Like sometimes you just get unlucky and you get two big hits against you, and
Yeah.
boom, she just healed like 100 hit points. But overall, I got fairly consistent kills. Like some of them are pretty scruffed, but I was never really close to dying. It's more like they just take longer.
It's more a
But
test of endurance.
exactly, like I didn't actually like most of the fights. I maybe used one piece of food and maybe one dose of like prayer potion, but most of the time I didn't need any. So
Honestly, that's a good point to be at for PVM of any
yeah,
type.
exactly. I think it's pretty decent. My click accuracy when I did was really bad. I kept misclicking. I feel that the click area on the moons themselves could be a little bit bigger. Because I kept sort of clicking to them, meaning I would walk to them and get hit with their special effects because I'm not standing on the glowing moon. So few minor things like that, but I'm pretty sure I could, get better at those. Um, and then I did the Skotitso Gale as well. See, I'm just going to all the bosses right now. Had a big bossing week.
It'll be fun to see when you get to raids and necks and all that other
Yeah, I do
fun
want to give
stuff.
Tombs of Amascot entry mode a try now that we have it unlocked, but I need to be a bit more awake for that.
Yeah, there's
So.
absolutely no reason not to. So
No, I think I have the levels based on what I've seen in terms of guides. But it's definitely going to be another step up. So to me, it makes sense my goal is to go through a bunch of bosses and get the medium combat achievements and try and get more comfortable with some of the mechanics. So I want to get some of the scurriest achievements. I want to go and do the deranged and crazy archaeologist for some more movement stuff. Giant mole, mostly because I need that for the diary.
so basically just teeing up all the mid-level combat stuff is what I'm getting from
Exactly. And then try and chip away of the medium combat achievements along the way, which should be good.
Sounds good. I'll get there eventually, maybe. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, depending on how things go combat-wise, because we've all heard about my combat adventures in game here that can go one way or another, seemingly. But it comes down to preparation, I think, and planning for the fight more so than what actually goes on the fight. At least that's my takeaway at this point in time. But I hope that we have encapsulated the discussion on sailing as some portion of the population sees it out there in terms of our main piece of content this week, because it does feel good to talk about it, because I'm honestly at the point where I think Jagex needs to start considering whether they cut their losses on it, and we went through the why on all of that. So do let us know what you think on that, and of course Sirion's combat adventures as well in the
Yeah, tell me
comments.
what boss I should do next that I haven't mentioned yet. And please don't make it a wilderness boss. I know
Dagannoth
I should,
Kings.
but I don't want to.
Dagannoth Kings.
The Dagannoth Kings. I'm trying to ignore that they exist, you know? Mostly because it's a pain to get to them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But they're part of the hard achievement diary of the Fremenic area, so I think I will have to eventually.
Indeed. And of course, if you want to chat with us or hang with us, mentioned the Clan Quest clan chat earlier, but we also have our own friends chat as well, which you can find in game, which is BitsBytes. And we do have the community Discord over at update.show/Discord. But I'll just say that pretty much brings us to the end of the programming for this week. If you want to subscribe, we're on all the podcast listening services out there: Apple, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Amazon, and more. And just visit update.show/OS. And of course, we're also on YouTube at youtube.com/@OSRSUpdate. But I don't have anything else. You good?
Yeah, all good.
All right, then. Well, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update, where we'll be talking about spiders. See you then, everyone. Take care.
BP. Bye.